Lena Small, Smallboy interview by Carla Lynda Daystar. Kisika Wadak. Time and place. This interview was done by Carla Lynda Daystar at the Wetaskiwin General Hospital on October 29th, 2019. Lena Small, Smallboy. Lena points out that these surnames are used interchangeable since it is all referring to the same family. Some of the small boys live on the Rocky Boy Indian Reservation in the state of Montana, and the last name that they use is Small. She said that in the 1960s her brother James Smallboy legally changed his surname Smallboy to Small in order to have the same surname as their relatives in Rocky Boy. The writer takes all responsibility for any errors in translation since this interview was conducted mostly in Cree with very little English being used. Lena can speak very good English, but she chose to speak her indigenous language, which is Plains Cree. Lena, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Hi in Plains Cree, for coming to interview me so that I can finally tell my story. So many times in my life I have wanted someone to listen to my story because I have an important story to tell. Not so much because I think so highly of myself. I need to tell the story, and I need the young people to listen to how one woman suffered greatly because of the policies and the laws made by a government that is thousands of miles away. She still uses the word miles instead of kilometers because the metric system was not introduced into Canadian life until very recently in her life. The membership provisions in the Indian Act have caused me great sorrow and hardship in my life, and I would like this to be a major part of my legacy, to make the young people understand how people can suffer so much because of government laws that they are completely powerless to control. I'm not the only one to have suffered this story. Many women have also suffered the same fate. I do not speak for all of them. I can only speak for myself. I am also grateful, Nina Sogan Man, that our relatives Lolly Small and Mary Smallboy sent you to this hospital to come and do this interview with me. You offered me tobacco to do this spiritual interview, but I have not smoked for 2 months since I've been in here. But I don't miss it much because I force myself not to think about it. Maybe later you can drop off a pack of cigarettes with Lolly or Marie. Right now I don't feel like talking because I am in so much pain from my broken leg. Maybe I will do the best I can, I don't know. As all Cree traditional people say, I don't know everything, no one does, but I will tell you everything that I know. We all say that because that is how all ancient generations were taught to speak the truth. To acknowledge that only Creator knows all knowledge, that human beings need to humble themselves in the eyes of the Creator, to admit their humility. Lena has green eyes, hazel eyes, and light brown hair. She has the coloring of the white race but the bone structure of an indigenous Native American red race. Her genetic features speak of the fact that there has been much intermarriage between all the people of what is now North America with the indigenous people here. In the writer's opinion, her beauty would make it to the start page of Edward S. Curtis photo album. I did not tell her this since she is a humble woman. I did not tell her that I appreciate her natural beauty, as in she does not hairspray her bangs to the sky and back again to feel great about herself. I was born in Hobbema, now called Musqueam, April 16th, 1935. No one went to the hospital back then. There was no hospital in Hobbema. After a while the government built one, but that was not until much later after I was born. It didn't stay open for long. They closed it down after a while and it became a clinic, and then the building eventually became the Ermineskin Band office in the 1970s. Since then, it has gone through several uses until now. It houses the Ermineskin Education Trust. I was born in a log house. Everyone on the reservation lived in a log house back then. We used to live in teepees all year long before there was any such thing as a reservation. But that was when we were free on the plains living as nomads. By the time I was born in 1935, all of us were living on reservations in Canada, in the US. There were 4 of us siblings. There was me, Irene, Nipus Denny, and James Small. Our oldest brother was named Daniel, pronounced as J. Nigyan in Plains Cree, and he died in the early 1960s. My mom was sick after giving birth to my youngest siblings. She never really recovered from childbirth. As I have said, there was no hospitals at the time where women could go and safely give birth. This is not to say that most births were dangerous. Most women gave birth in the home and it was safe because there were always midwives around to assist them. My sister Irene was one of the youngest one, and she was 3 years old when our mom died. Our mother died of TB, tuberculosis. So did my Muslim, Plains Cree word for grandpa. Many of our people died of TB at that time. Finally, the government built a hospital in Edmonton just for TB patients, and it was called Aberhart. There were so many patients who went there from Hobbema. Sometimes they would stay for treatment for 6 months or 2 years. They would stay at the hospital for all that time and never see their families. They were not allowed to see their friends and families because TB was a highly contagious disease. It could be caught just by being near a person who coughed. It could spread just by catching the germ in someone's cough. So people didn't visit their relatives at the TB hospital. Also, there was never any money for a bus fare or train fare to go to Edmonton from Hobbema. Many of our people died of TB, and many had to stay in the hospital for a long time. Sometimes I can barely hear you. Sometimes it is as if you are so far away. My hearing is not too good now. That is what happens to a human body when you get old. I used to be strong and healthy my whole life. I was lucky. Now I slipped and broke my leg and I cannot walk yet. That is why they put me in long-term care at the hospital. I joke with the nurses here and the doctors. I have always been raised to get along with people and to joke with whoever lets you joke with them. Sometimes it's not so easy to joke with people who are kind of miserable, so I've learned to keep my distance from them. In 1951, I left the reservation to get married. As a result of this marriage to a non-treaty Indian, I lost my status as a treaty Indian. He was a Métis, so he didn't have treaty Indian status. I automatically lost my treaty status, and it has been the story of my life ever since. Writer's note. This is the most emotional elders interview that I have ever done. While I was listening to Lena Small tell the story of her life, I teared up a few times, even though I have done at least a dozen elder interviews in the past several years. Most of them have been donated to the Samson Museum. In 2011, after my job as a Samson Cree Nation Lands and Estates Manager was phased out by the Chief and Council, these interviews were turned over to the Tribal Museum. They include interviews with Chief Victor Buffalo, Dolly Buffalo, Henry Nipus, Irene Nipus Denny, Monica Suze, Justine Simon, Joe Boyces, Elizabeth Smallboy Montour, Helen Lightning, Mary Jane Saddleback, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Crane, Mary Cryer. This is not an exhaustive list. This is not just my story. This membership mess in the Indian Act has messed up many women lives across Canada. I was later to learn in my life. From the time I got married in 1951, my life became very hard. I was no longer an Ermineskin band member. That law had kicked me out of my own reservation. I lost my treaty number. I lost my band membership. This happened to every woman who married off the reserve, as it was referred to back then. I no longer had a home to live in, no roof over my head. As I started having a family, we all had to work hard just to survive and make a living for ourselves. We did all kinds of odd jobs wherever we could find farm work. Sometimes we ended up as far as BC just to find work as fruit pickers. We did whatever we could and ate whatever we could. Sometimes we would have to hunt in order to get by. My kids all learned to work hard, and hard work came naturally to them after a while. You are only hearing the story of one family, my family. There are many other families out there who had to struggle like we did for so many years because of the government policy that had affected our daily life. I cannot give the details of all the struggles that I have gone through with my kids, but I can only give you the memories here and there. As I married a non-treaty Indian, I lost my status as a treaty Indian woman because of that law. But it was so unfair because if a treaty man married a non-treaty Indian, she gained a treaty status even if she was not even an Indian. We lost and they gained where we lost. I saw many women gaining treaty status and treaty rights this way. It didn't matter what race they were originally from. If they married a treaty man, they gained his status through this same law in the Indian Act. I felt this injustice because I was forced by law to lose my treaty Indian status. I could not own a home on the reserve. My children had no right to an education because status was taken from them when it was taken from me. I no longer had any medical rights that were granted through the Medicine Chest Clause in Treaty 6 and supposedly kept in the Indian Act. Sometimes I felt like we lost everything just because I got married. If I would have chosen to stay unmarried, none of this would have happened because I would not have to lost my treaty rights. Many women chose this path. They did not get married so they would not lose their treaty status. Their kids also did not lose treaty status and they were able to keep their treaty rights this way. But I wanted to do what was right and I legally married the man of my choice. I had to leave the reservation. I had to leave my home, and what was the hardest was that I had to leave my relatives behind, people that I loved and still love to this day. One of the people that I still miss to this day is my uncle, Chief Bob Smallboy. He was the last hereditary chief of Ermineskin Band after a Muslim grandfather, Chief Dan Mine, died in 1959. Chief Bob Smallboy led a group of followers from Ermineskin Band to the Kootenay Plains to live in tents and teepees according to the nomadic way of life that was lost to us as a people. The people who followed him lived by hunting, fishing, and gathering the way our ancestors did, winter and summer. He did this because he felt that alcohol was destroying our people. Many of our people were dying because of alcohol, and he wanted our culture not to die with the people, so he took them away from here, the reservation. What he did was a great act of leadership for a chief to do. This should be learned by our children in the schools, but I hear that it is not even in the curriculum. We should have control over what is taught to our children in the schools. We as elders need to see that happen in our lifetime. If we don't act on it, who will? For example, there is a big fancy billboard out there right now by the highway near the bow and arrow store. It says Mama Wetaskiwin, which means in Plains Cree, working together in English. This is wrong. It's supposed to be Mama Wo Wetaskiwin. Wo, not we. It is supposed to be Mama Wo. But who will correct that? There should be a council of elders consulted for these kinds of projects. We will lose our language if the people who are supposed to keep it safe are not keeping it safe. You have to look at the long-term results, not just the present. But who will listen to me? Who are those people who put up the billboards? Who do they consult? They have an obligation to keep the language safe for future generations. That is what elders had to do in our culture. When an elder talked, they always pronounced every syllable for every word. They kept the purity of the root word for safekeeping in future generations. Slang words were not used by elders very much. They kept our language safe by adhering to true words. I don't want to lose my story about my uncle, Chief Bob Smallboy. After a while living on that crown land, Chief Bob Smallboy was approached by the police. Through an interpreter, I believe it was Melvin Nadeau, he was asked to vacate that land and to move back to the reservation or he would face the legal consequences, maybe even go to jail. Through that interpreter, the chief told the police that he and his people committed no legal wrong and that they could not charge them with anything breaking the law. He told them that if they needed to arrest anyone, that they should arrest him since he was their leader. The police had to let him go because there was no law broken by anyone and there was nothing under any law to charge him with. The authorities did not just give up right there. Next, they sent a delegation of big shot politicians from Ottawa, federal politicians, and again they strongly suggested to Chief Smallboy that he lead his people back to the reservation. He stood up against them. He told them that the police could not charge him with a crime because he had not committed no crime. He told the Ottawa politicians that Ottawa had never been able to keep their promises made under Treaty 6, and now they were asking him to keep the promises of living on the reservation. He said to them, "How can you ask us Treaty Indians to keep our promises under Treaty 6 when you have never kept up your end of the bargain?" So they let him alone, and his followers have been living there in the Kootenay Plains on Crown land since the early 1960s. Many of them moved back, but some of them chose to live there right up until this day. These are not my words, they are the words of my cousin Elizabeth Smallboy Montour. She married Joe Montour of Sampson. When she married him, she had to move from Ermineskin Band to Sampson Band because her husband was from Sampson. Again, the Indian Act made her do that. It was covered in the membership sections. Elizabeth is now the only living daughter of Chief Bob Smallboy. He also had a son, Joe Smallboy, who married Dorothy Roan. They also lived at Smallboy's camp in the Kootenay Plains. There was another daughter, Clara Smallboy Rattlesnake, who moved up there with him, with her family. Some of my ancestry can be traced back to Chief Bobtail, but that is another story for another day. The story goes back to the days before there was a border between the United States and Canada, the days when our tribe was still nomadic and free. Through Chief Bobtail, we can trace the history of our relatives back to the state of Montana on the Rocky Boy Reservation. We have many relatives there right up until this day. The Crees were the northernmost tribe of what the white man now calls the Plains Indians. Our nieces, Mary and Lolly Smallboy Small, know a lot more about this history because they have done a lot more research on this, and it would be best to ask them about the details of events. I know the general history as told to me by my grandmother, Isabel Smallboy. Our family came to what was Hobbema from the state of Montana. We were all Crees. We spoke the same language and we settled here with other Crees from other destinations when the borders of the reservations were being formed. Our language was our common bond and we settled here as relatives and we were accepted. That is not the way it is today. We have lost much of our culture and our bondings together as one people. That is not the way it is today. We have lost much of our culture and our bondings together as one people. People don't treat each other the way they used to. They used to treat each other with respect, now they don't. For example, I was asked to speak sometime last year at a meeting at the Elder Center at Ermineskin. I was given a tobacco offering and I agreed to speak, not ever having the intention of hurting anyone's feelings. I stood up to talk in public at that meeting to speak about how we were losing our traditions and that the young people were the ones who were being left impoverished by this loss of cultural upbringing. Well, when an elder is asked to speak in public in traditional times, it was expected that the elder would be respected. That day I learned that it was not to be the case in my life at that point. When an elder is asked to speak, that elder will always say that it is not his or her intention to hurt anyone's feelings, that the elder only means to carry out the traditional obligation to teach ancient wisdom to the young people and to pass down our customs. That is the only intention, not to slight anyone or hurt anyone. I did this, I thought it was enough. Apparently, I was wrong. I was talking about the lack of morality among some of our women having so many different kids from so many different men. I told the people that this was viewed as wrong in ancient times. One of the women at the meeting, who was a really high job at the band office, took offense to what I was saying. I never meant to hurt her or anyone in her family. I was speaking in general terms about the loss of our culture, and she took it personally. At that meeting, right in front of everyone, she made me apologize to her mom, even though it was never my intention to speak of anyone in particular. Since I had married out, I was at the mercy of the community to keep my place or suffer the risks associated with any misspoken words at all. Women like me who had married out always had to remain humble at the haughtiness of the powerful few. This not so young woman put me in my humble place at that meeting and humiliated me and deliberately shamed me, even though my comments were never directed at anyone in particular. This not so young woman put me in my humble place at that meeting and humiliated me and deliberately shamed me, even though my comments were never directed at anyone in particular. Writer's note: at this juncture, I told Lena that that kind of treatment is called eating crow in the white man's world. When someone force feeds you to eat your words, I told her that my dad used to say that you can't unhappens a happening, and that she has earned the people's respect, and it can never be taken away from her by anyone. I told her that I had the greatest respect for her since I had witnessed her speeches at many different cultural events, such as feasts and traditional wakes and funerals, and that she is a very wise and respected elder. I told her that no one has a right to disrespect her because she had lived the law. I told her that no one has a right to disrespect her because she had lived a life of integrity, that once you have earned respect, no one has that power to take away from you. Lena went on to say, I was sad that she tried to humiliate me, and in actuality, she humiliated herself by speaking to an elder with such disrespect and treating me so disrespectfully. Lena went on to say, I was sad that she tried to humiliate me, and in actuality, she humiliated herself by speaking to an elder with such disrespect and treating me so disgracefully. I was sadder still. I saw at that moment how our culture has disappeared. This would have never happened to me if we were living in traditional times. Elders had a lot of power at public events, and they stood up for each other. They never allowed anyone to be disrespected and treated with dishonor in public, especially an elder. Now it is different. When an elder is asked to speak many times, there are a few people listening. There are children running around and yelling. Children cannot be blamed for this behavior. Someone has to teach them that it is bad manners to speak over the words of an elder by making noise. This would have never happened in the past. Children were taught to respect public speakers, and they were never allowed to interrupt or cause any kind of disturbance. There was silence when someone spoke. People listened. That is gone from our social life now. Disrespect for elders as public speakers is now allowed to continue. This should not be so. As hard as it is for us, we have to turn back to time and start listening to our elders because they are the keepers of our traditions. It is a hard obligation to pass down, but it must be done, and it has always been done by the elders. It is a hard job to keep traditions alive and strong. That is why elders supported each other in traditional times. They knew and understood how hard it is to keep traditions strong. In traditional chieftainship laws, there are times when the women are the leaders. They keep the tradition strong. They tell me that it is a woman from down east who brought a court case to the Supreme Court of Canada that caused the government to change the membership sections in the Indian Act. At that point, I understood that she was talking about the Laval case in the 70s, where Jeanette Laval lost her treaty status under the membership provisions of the Indian Act. She challenged these provisions on the basis that it denied her equality before the law as guaranteed under the Canadian Constitutional Bill of Rights, because the same legal consequences were not suffered by men whose wife gained treaty Indian status instead of losing it. Like women did, the status denied women equality before the law. I did not say anything to Lena at this point about the Laval case. I just understood that this was what she was talking about. I had too much respect for her, so I did not want to interrupt her. There's another woman that I heard about who took a case like this to the Supreme Court of Canada. She is a grandmother from BC, and some of her grandchildren have Indian status and some of them don't. Again, it is assumed by the writer she is talking about the Sharon MacIver case, but the interview was allowed to continue without interruption. The Indian Act was amended in 1985 after the Laval case was decided in Jeanette Laval's favor in the 70s. The amending bill was called C-31, and it allowed women to gain their lost status back. And in other words, they could come back to the reservation. The membership codes are now in the hands of individual bands all across Canada. Lena continues, that is how I came back to the reserve, was what they call a C-31. I came back after the amendments were made in 1985. But you know, politics is funny. Now they want to make me an honorary member of our tribe, of Ermineskin Band, or Ermineskin Cree Nation as they call themselves. They just finished humiliating me in public over a comment I'd ever intended to make, and now they're trying to make me an honorary member. That's why I'm saying that politics is funny sometimes. They gave me a shanty house to live that probably no one else wanted to live in, but I appreciate the roof over my head and the fact that I am not homeless. I appreciate the heat since many times I've had to live without any central heating in my house. I live a simple life, and I thank Creator every day for another day of life with my loved ones. I live a simple life, and I thank Creator every day for another day of life with my loved ones. I burn sweetgrass and pray as soon as I get up every morning, for that is the old way of our people. Thank you, hi, now for doing this interview with me and allowing me to tell my story. The writer wishes to say that Lena was doing the very best she could under the circumstances. She was under some painkillers for her broken leg, and she was still in a lot of pain when she gave this interview, but she is to be commended for her perseverance. She has much traditional knowledge and wisdom to give. I would love to do another interview with her whenever she is ready. She is a treasure to the community. She loves to laugh about what is funny in life. She has prayed for all of us at some point in her daily prayers. She's a highly spiritual person who lives a life of integrity.